My name is Julia Mercer. I'm 31 years old. And the strange thing about the moment your future dies is that it almost never sounds dramatic when it begins. There is no music, no shattered glass, no perfect sentence hanging in the air like a warning from God. Sometimes it starts with rain against a window. Sometimes it starts in the half-dark of a living room you have paid bills in, cooked meals in, folded laundry in, kissed someone in. Sometimes it starts in a place that still looks like home, even as it quietly stops being one. I served 3 tours overseas. I have been home for 4 years now, which apparently is long enough for people who have never had war wired into their nervous system to decide healing should be finished by now. Wrapped up, resolved, neatly filed away. I do therapy twice a week. I take the medication I was prescribed. I know my triggers. I know how to ground myself. I know how to count breaths, name objects in a room, press my feet into the floor, remind myself that I am not there anymore. Most days I manage. Some days I don't. Thunder still does something to me. Fireworks are worse. A slammed door can split my heartbeat open before my mind catches up. I don't say that for pity. I say it because it is true. Trauma does not care whether it is inconvenient for the people standing near it. When Daniel and I first got together, he seemed to understand that. Or at least he knew how to sound like someone who did. Daniel Hayes was 29, sharp jaw, easy smile, the kind of man who knew how to make concern look attractive. In the beginning, he said all the right things. He asked questions in a soft voice. He held my hand when I woke up from nightmares. He told his friends he admired my strength. He liked introducing me as someone incredible, someone tougher than anyone I know. At the time, I mistook admiration for safety. That is the dangerous thing about people who perform compassion well. By the time you realize it is only a performance, you have already built routines around them. We had been together for 2 years, living together for 8 months. Long enough that my shampoo was next to his in the shower. Long enough that my coffee mug had a permanent place in the cabinet. Long enough that people had started using words like stable, serious, future. And for a while I believed them. But little things had started changing. Not in the loud way people expect when a relationship begins to rot. It was quieter than that. Daniel rolling his eyes when I declined crowded bars. Daniel making little jokes in front of his friends when I checked exits at restaurants. Daniel calling me intense with a smile that was just careless enough to pass as teasing. Then came comments that lingered longer than jokes should. "You're home now, Jules. You can't let this control your life forever." My friend's cousin was in the Marines and he seems normal. Normal. That word has a cruel edge when people use it like a weapon. I tried to explain, more than once. I told him healing was not linear. I told him some triggers ambushed you on good days and left you embarrassed on the floor of your own mind. I told him support did not have to look grand. Sometimes it was just not making someone feel ashamed for surviving badly. He would nod. He would kiss my forehead. He would say, "Of course, baby." And then, weeks later, he would say something else that made it clear he had not really listened at all. The night everything broke apart was a Tuesday. There was a storm, not even a particularly violent one by normal standards, just a hard, steady rain and thunder that rolled low and close enough to rattle the windows. I had fallen asleep around midnight. By 3 a.m, I was sitting upright in the living room, fighting to remember which country I was in. My heart was pounding so hard it made my ribs ache. The room was dim except for the lamp in the corner. Rain striped the glass. My hands were shaking. I was trying to breathe through it the way my therapist taught me. In for 4. Hold. Out for 6. Name 5 things you can see. Lamp. Curtains. Coffee table. Bookshelf. The blue throw blanket folded over the arm of the couch. I was halfway back to myself when Daniel walked in. He was shirtless, sleep-creased, annoyed, before he even understood what he was looking at. He stood there for a second, hand braced on the doorway. Then he sighed. Not worried. Not gentle. Annoyed. "Julia," he said, voice rough with irritation. "Seriously?" I looked up at him, still trying to steady my breathing. "Sorry," I whispered. "I didn't mean to wake you." He laughed once, a dry, humorless sound. "That's the problem, though, isn't it? I never know when this is going to happen." I stared at him. Maybe part of me still expected softness. Maybe that was my mistake. "I just need a minute," I said quietly. But he was already warming to his own anger. "No, actually, I'm tired of pretending this is normal." Something cold moved through me then. Not panic, not even hurt yet. Just that sudden, sick awareness that a door inside someone has opened, and what is about to walk through it has been there for a while. I stood slowly, one hand against the back of the couch. "Daniel, you've been back for 4 years," he snapped. 4 years. Rain hit the window harder. I could hear the blood in my ears. He kept going. My ex's sister dated a guy in the National Guard, and he was fine. Totally fine. So I'm sorry, but at some point this starts feeling less like trauma and more like... He waved a hand at me. I don't know. A whole identity. I do not remember taking a breath. I only remember looking at him and thinking, he has been rehearsing this. Are you hearing yourself? I asked. Yes, he said. For once I am. I'm hearing myself say what everyone else is too polite to say. That landed harder than anything else. Not because I believed him, because he wanted me to. He wanted me to imagine rooms full of people, secretly agreeing that I was too much, too damaged, too embarrassing to love easily. Your friends don't understand why I stay, he said. Do you know that? I felt something inside me go very still. Daniel. No, listen, they think you're unstable. And honestly, sometimes I do too. The room blurred for a second. Not from tears. From the effort it took to remain standing. He crossed his arms and looked at me like he was the exhausted one. Like he was the victim of my private war bleeding inconveniently into his sleep schedule. Real women don't fall apart every time it storms, he said. That sentence did not just hurt. It altered something. It reached into the center of me and snapped the final thread I had still been using to hold the relationship together. I think if he had yelled, maybe I would have yelled back. If he had cursed, maybe anger would have carried me. But contempt is quieter than rage, more intimate. It sits closer to the bone. Daniel, I said, and my voice sounded far away to my own ears. You know what happened over there. He shrugged. I know everybody has trauma. You don't see me turning my family issues into a personality. I just looked at him. He took my silence as permission. That was his last mistake. Your PTSD is humiliating, Julia, he said flatly. Get over it or get out. There it was. Not a misunderstanding. Not stress. Not a careless phrase he could later soften into something else. A choice. Clear, ugly, final. For a second, all I could hear was the rain. I thought about every appointment I had dragged myself to. Every bad night I had survived quietly. Every time I had tried to explain what healing looked like when it wasn't cinematic or inspiring or easy for other people to watch. And I thought about how this man, the one sleeping beside me, eating food I cooked, making plans with me for next summer, had just taken the most vulnerable wound in my body and called it disgusting. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not defend myself. That seemed to confuse him more than anything. I nodded once. A small movement. Then I said, okay. He frowned. Okay? Yes. I turned, walked past him, and went back to the bedroom. Behind me, I could feel him standing there, waiting for the fight he thought he had earned. He never got it. I lay down on my side of the bed and stared into the dark until morning. Daniel eventually came back in. He hesitated for a second, maybe expecting me to say something. When I didn't, he slid under the covers and let out the kind of sigh people make when they think an unpleasant conversation is over. By morning, he acted almost normal. That was the surreal part. He kissed my shoulder before work like he had not gutted something in me 6 hours earlier. He asked whether we were still on for dinner with friends later that week. He grabbed his keys, said, "Try to get some rest today," and left like kindness had not just been ripped out of his voice the night before. I stood alone in the kitchen after the door shut. The apartment was quiet. The storm had passed. Sunlight fell across the counter in clean gold bars, and for one disorienting moment, everything looked painfully ordinary. Then I picked up my phone. There was one group chat I had not opened in a while. Women and men I had served with. People who knew what certain sounds did to your chest. People who never asked for a cleaner version of your pain. My thumb hovered over the screen. I could still hear him. Humiliating. Get over it. Get out. So I typed. Not a dramatic speech. Not a breakdown. Just the truth. I wrote exactly what he had said to me. Word for word. Then I hit send. And somewhere beneath the numbness, beneath the humiliation and the ache and the strange calm that comes right before your life changes direction, I felt it. Not revenge. Not yet. Something steadier than that. The feeling of not being alone. The first reply came in less than 30 seconds. Maya, he said, what? Then another. Lopez, Julia, tell me that's not word for word. I stared at the screen, my fingers resting against the edge of the counter, heart still not fully settled from the night before. It's exact, I typed back. There was a pause. Not silence, not really. More like the kind of stillness that happens when a room full of people inhales at the same time. Then everything hit at once. Chen, nah, absolutely not. Ramirez, you still at that address? Dawson, you need help moving? I've got a truck. Kowalski, I can take Friday off. Elena, say the word, I'm there. I swallowed. It had been a while since I'd felt that particular kind of response. Not sympathy, not pity. Readiness. I leaned against the counter and exhaled slowly. I didn't ask. I started typing, then stopped. Because I knew better. You didn't have to ask. Not with them. Before I could finish the sentence, my phone buzzed again, this time with a call. The name on the screen made something in my chest tighten in a different way. Captain Lauren Mitchell, retired. I answered immediately. Ma'am. Her voice came through steady, sharp, exactly the same as it had been years ago. The kind of voice that could cut through chaos and make you believe for a second that everything was still under control. Julia, she said, I just read what you posted. Yes, ma'am. A beat. Is it accurate? I closed my eyes for a second. Yes. Another pause. Shorter this time. You have somewhere safe to go? My sister said I can stay with her, I replied. It's not far. Good, Mitchell said. No hesitation, no softening. Just a decision already made. We'll be there Saturday, 0800. I straightened instinctively, even though she couldn't see me. Ma'am, you don't have to. Did I sound optional? She cut in. The corner of my mouth twitched, despite everything. No, ma'am. That's what I thought, she said. We don't leave our own in a place where they're being disrespected. Not like that. Something in my throat tightened. It wasn't the plan. It was the certainty. And Julia, she added, her tone lowering just slightly, this isn't just about you anymore. I knew what she meant. He hadn't just insulted me. He had dismissed something every single one of them carried. Yes, ma'am. We'll handle it, she said. Then she hung up. I stood there for a long moment, phone still in my hand, the quiet of the apartment pressing in around me. Saturday. 2 days. That was all it took for my life to split into before and after. Daniel didn't notice anything different that day. That was almost impressive. He came home around 6, dropped his keys in the same ceramic bowl by the door, kicked off his shoes, and asked what I wanted for dinner, like we were still operating inside the same version of reality. Whatever's easy, I said. He nodded, already scrolling through his phone. You okay? He asked, not looking at me. It was the kind of question people ask when they want credit for asking it, not when they want an answer. I'm fine, I said. And in a strange way, it was true. Not fine like healed, fine like decided. He seemed satisfied with that. Good, he said. I've got a long week. Don't really have the energy for, He gestured vaguely. I did know. He meant me, or at least the version of me that made him uncomfortable. I nodded. Understood. That was the last honest exchange we had. The next morning, I started packing. Nothing dramatic. No music, no crying. Just quiet, deliberate movements. Clothes folded into boxes. Books stacked carefully. The small things I had brought into this apartment piece by piece. A life assembled slowly, without ever realizing how easily it could be dismantled. I labeled everything neatly. Bedroom, kitchen, personal. Daniel left for work halfway through. He kissed my cheek on the way out. Text me if you need anything, he said. I almost laughed. Sure, I replied. When the door closed behind him, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Then I kept packing. Thursday afternoon, something unexpected happened. My phone rang again. The caller ID made me pause. Mr. Hayes, Daniel's father. I had met him a handful of times. Quiet man, observant. The kind of presence that didn't demand attention, but somehow held it anyway. I answered. Hello? Julia, he said, his voice measured. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. No, sir. A brief silence. I spoke with Daniel this morning, he said. He mentioned you've been distant. Of course he did. I leaned against the wall, staring at the half-packed bookshelf. I imagine that's his version of events. Another pause. Would you mind telling me yours? There was something in his tone. Not suspicion. Not judgment. Invitation. So I told him. Not everything. Just the part that mattered. Word for word. The same way I had written it in the group chat. When I finished, the line went completely silent. For a moment, I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard him exhale. Slow. Heavy. She said that, he murmured. Not a question. A realization. Yes, sir. Another silence. Longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Harder. Colder. I didn't raise him to speak to anyone like that, he said. Especially not someone who's carried what you've carried. You're not responsible for what he said, I replied quietly. Like hell I'm not, he said, sharper now. A parent is always responsible for what they fail to correct. I closed my eyes briefly. There it was again. That difference. Understanding. Julia, he continued, his tone steadying. Whatever you need to do, you do it. I swallowed. Thank you, sir. And for what it's worth, he added, my brother came back from overseas different. We didn't understand it at the time. Called it something else back then. He never got the help he needed. A beat. I won't make the same mistake twice. Something in my chest tightened again. Not from pain. From recognition. Thank you, I said again. Take care of yourself, he replied. Then the line went dead. That night, the group chat exploded again. Lopez, update, I've got shirts made. A photo followed. Black fabric, white lettering. Operation, bring Julia home. Underneath it, smaller text. No one left behind. I stared at the image longer than I meant to. My throat tightened. Elena, you are not wearing that ironically, Lopez. Lopez, speak for yourself. I'm wearing it with pride. Chen, I'm bringing coffee. Real coffee. Not that watered-down civilian nonsense. Dawson, truck's ready. Saturday 700 departure. Mitchell, 0800 arrival. Be on time. I smiled despite myself. It felt surreal, like something out of another life. Or maybe like something that had never really left. Just waited quietly until I needed it again. Friday night, Daniel went out with friends. He invited me. I declined. Suit yourself, he said with a shrug. Might do you good to be around people. I nodded. Maybe next time. He left without pressing. That was the thing about him. He only pushed when it benefited him. When it didn't, he let things slide. He came home late, a little unsteady, a little louder than usual. He tried to pull me closer in bed. I stayed still, pretended to be asleep. After a moment, he gave up and rolled over. Within minutes, he was snoring. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening, waiting. Not for him, for morning. Saturday came quietly. No storm, no warning. Just soft light slipping through the curtains and the sound of my own breathing, steady and controlled. I was already dressed. Jeans, t-shirt, boots. Everything I owned was packed. Boxes stacked neatly by the door. Bags lined up in order. Efficient. Contained. Ready. Daniel was still asleep. Face turned into the pillow, completely unaware that his life, or at least his version of it, was about to fracture in a way he could not talk his way out of. I checked the time. 7:47. 3 minutes. I stood by the door, hand resting lightly on the handle, heart calm in a way that would have surprised me a week ago. Not numb, not broken, just steady. Outside, somewhere in the distance, I heard the low rumble of an engine. Then another, and another. I didn't look out the window. I didn't need to. At exactly 8 o'clock, the doorbell rang. The sound of the doorbell cut clean through the apartment. Not loud, not aggressive, just precise, final. Behind me, I heard Daniel shift in bed, a groan slipping out of him as he dragged himself halfway awake. "Who the hell is here this early?" he muttered. I didn't answer. I just opened the door. And there she was, Captain Lauren Mitchell. Dress uniform. Every ribbon, every medal exactly where it belonged. Bronze star, Purple Heart. Service bars aligned with the kind of discipline that never really leaves you, even after retirement. Behind her, a line of people stretching down the walkway, some in uniform, some in jeans and boots, all standing the same way. Still, focused, present. For a second, the world narrowed to that single image. Not because of how many of them there were, but because of what they represented. Mitchell's eyes met mine. "Specialist Mercer," she said, voice carrying just enough to reach inside the apartment. "We're here. Not to help. Not if you need us. Just, we're here." Something inside my chest loosened. "Yes, ma'am," I replied. Behind me, I heard Daniel's footsteps. Slower now. Confused. "Julia," he called out, his voice thick with sleep. "Who is—" He stopped when he reached the doorway. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I could feel the moment his brain tried to catch up with what his eyes were seeing. 15 people, some scarred, some carrying themselves with that unmistakable weight of experience. All looking past me, at him. "What is this?" he asked. Mitchell's expression didn't change. "Ma'am," she said evenly, addressing me, but letting the words land where they needed to. "We're here to assist with your relocation." Daniel let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You're joking." No one responded. That was the thing. There was no performance in it, no theatrics, just quiet, coordinated purpose. "Julia," he said, turning to me now, his voice sharpening. "What is this? You called, what, your army friends to, what, stage some kind of scene?" I finally looked at him. Really looked. At the confusion, the irritation, the faint edge of embarrassment creeping in now that he realized this was not something he could dismiss with a joke. "You told me to get out," I said calmly. His mouth opened. Closed. "That's not, Julia, come on, you know I didn't mean—" I held his gaze. "Which part didn't you mean?" Silence. Behind Mitchell, I saw Lopez shift slightly, arms crossed. Chen stood with a travel mug in hand, completely still, but watching everything. Elena's eyes were fixed on Daniel with a kind of quiet intensity that would have made most people take a step back. Daniel tried again. "Look, I was frustrated, okay? This has been a lot. I didn't think you'd escalate it like this." Escalate. The word hung there, absurd and fragile. Mitchell stepped forward half a pace. Not aggressive. Just enough. Sir, she said, voice level, your partner communicated your directive clearly. We're here to ensure her transition is completed safely and efficiently. He blinked. Transition? She's not... This isn't happening. Julia, tell them to leave. I didn't move. Didn't raise my voice. I'm leaving, I said. And for the first time since he'd woken up, something like panic flickered across his face. Over one argument? He snapped. You're seriously blowing up a 2-year relationship over one bad night? There it was. The rewrite. The minimization. The attempt to shrink what he had done into something manageable. I almost admired the instinct. Almost. It wasn't one night, I said quietly. It was just the first time you said it out loud. That landed. I saw it, not understanding, but recognition. Before he could respond, Mitchell gave a small nod. And like a switch had been flipped, the team moved. No chaos. No raised voices. Just motion. 2 people into the bedroom. 2 into the kitchen. Boxes lifted. Bags carried. Efficient. Practiced. Silent. Daniel stepped back instinctively as Dawson brushed past him with one of the larger containers. Hey, you can't just... This is my apartment too. Lopez paused just long enough to meet his eyes. Then you should have treated the person living in it with respect, she said simply. Then she kept moving. Daniel turned to me again, more desperate now. Julia, stop this. This is insane. I watched as Chen unplugged the coffee maker I had bought, wrapping the cord neatly before placing it into a box labeled kitchen. Insane. No. This was the most clarity I had felt in months. I'm not stopping it, I said. His jaw tightened. You're embarrassing both of us right now. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was familiar. Embarrassing. The same word. Different context. Same intent. Before I could respond, Elena stepped into the living room, holding a small wooden box. My wooden box. She glanced at me. Personal? She asked. I nodded. She opened it carefully. Inside, my medals. Untouched for years. Not displayed. Not talked about. Just kept. Elena lifted one gently. The Bronze Star. Daniel frowned. What is that? No one answered him immediately. Mitchell did. That, she said, her voice quieter now, but somehow heavier, is recognition for valor under fire. Daniel blinked. I what? Elena held up another. Purple heart. The room shifted. Not physically, but something in the air changed. Daniel looked at me. Really looked this time. You never told me about those. I met his eyes. You never asked. Silence. Mitchell stepped closer, her gaze steady. She didn't tell you, she said, because people who've actually lived through those moments don't tend to lead with them. Daniel's throat moved as he swallowed. I didn't know, he said weakly. No, Mitchell agreed. You didn't. She let that sit for a second. Then, and yet you felt qualified to judge the aftermath. That one hit. Harder than anything else said so far. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, pacing once across the room. This is being blown way out of proportion, he muttered. I said something I shouldn't have. Fine, I'll apologize. He stopped in front of me. I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean it like that. I studied his face. There was discomfort. There was urgency. But there was no understanding. No weight. Just a desire to fix the situation quickly so things could go back to normal. Back to a version of reality where his words didn't have consequences. That's the problem, I said softly. You didn't mean it like anything. He stared at me. What does that even mean? It means you said it without thinking about what it actually was. Behind him, the apartment was already changing. Walls looking emptier. Spaces opening up where my life used to sit. It means you think this is about one sentence, I continued, and not about what that sentence revealed. He shook his head, frustration building again. You're twisting this. No, I said. I'm finally seeing it clearly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, a voice from the hallway. Ma'am. We both turned. Dawson stood there, holding one of my duffel bags. Bedroom's clear. Mitchell nodded once. Good. She looked back at me. 5 more minutes. I nodded. Daniel exhaled sharply. So that's it? He said. You're just walking out? Letting them, what, parade you out like some kind of hero? Hero. The word felt foreign in his mouth. Like he was trying on something that didn't fit. I'm not a hero, I said. No, he shot back. Apparently you're a victim. That did it. Not because it hurt, but because it confirmed everything. I stepped closer to him. Not aggressive. Just enough that he couldn't pretend this was happening at a distance anymore. I survived something you can't even imagine, I said quietly. And instead of asking how to stand beside me while I healed, you decided it was inconvenient for you. His expression faltered. That's not... It is, I said. Behind me, I heard the last of the boxes being lifted. Footsteps moving toward the door. The apartment echoing slightly now. Empty. I took a breath. Not shaky. Not forced. Steady. You told me to get over it or get out, I said. I held his gaze. I chose to get out. Then I turned, walked past him, and stepped into the hallway. Outside, the morning air felt different. Clearer. Like something had been cut loose. Behind me, I heard him call my name. Once. Twice. I didn't stop. As I reached the walkway, Mitchell fell into step beside me. Convoy's ready, she said. I glanced at the line of vehicles parked along the street. Engines off. Doors open. Waiting. I nodded. Let's go. And for the first time since that stormy night, I felt like I could breathe all the way down to the bottom of my lungs again. The last box slid into the back of Dawson's truck at exactly 9:12. Not rushed. Not dragged out. Just done. 15 people could dismantle a life quickly when they moved with purpose. But they didn't leave right away. That was the part I hadn't expected. As the final tailgate shut, more cars began pulling up along the curb. Different ones. Minivans. Sedans. A couple of SUVs with car seats in the back. Family. Partners. Lives that had grown around the same people who once slept on dirt floors and counted breaths between explosions. They stepped out one by one. Wives. Husbands. Kids holding hands, peeking curiously at the quiet line of veterans. It shifted the atmosphere. Not louder, but fuller, more human. Daniel was still standing in the doorway of the apartment, like he hadn't fully processed that this wasn't something he could rewind. That this wasn't a scene. It was a consequence. A woman stepped forward from the newly arrived group, Sophia. I recognized her from photos in the group chat, Lopez's wife. She walked straight up to Daniel, calm but unmistakably direct. I work at the VA, she said. I see people like Julia every day. Daniel opened his mouth. She didn't give him time. You know what actually damages recovery? She continued. Being told your trauma is embarrassing. The word landed between them like something sharp. Daniel's jaw tightened. I said I was sorry. Sophia tilted her head slightly. For what? He hesitated. And that hesitation said everything. For what I said, he answered finally. That's not an apology, she replied. There was no anger in her voice, just certainty. An apology requires understanding what you did, she said. You're still trying to minimize it. Daniel looked around then, at the people, at the uniforms, at the quiet attention focused on him. For the first time since this started, he looked small. A car door slammed somewhere behind me. Another presence stepped forward, older, slower, but carrying something heavier than anyone else there. Daniel turned. Dad? Mr. Hayes didn't look at him right away. He walked past him. Straight to me. And then he stopped, stood up a little straighter, and gave me a salute. Clean, deliberate, the kind that wasn't for show. Specialist Mercer, he said, his voice steady but thick with something restrained. I owe you an apology. I shook my head immediately. Sir, you don't... I do, he interrupted, because somewhere along the line, I failed to teach my son what respect actually looks like. Silence fell across the group. Daniel shifted behind him. Dad, come on! Stop, Mr. Hayes said without turning around. One word. Enough. He looked back at me. My brother came back from war different, he said quietly. We didn't understand it. We didn't support him the way we should have. A pause. He didn't make it. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. Everyone there understood what they meant. Mr. Hayes exhaled slowly. I won't stand by and watch that kind of ignorance hurt someone else. He stepped back slightly, then turned, finally facing his son. What you said, he continued, his voice colder now, wasn't just cruel, it was ignorant. Daniel looked like he wanted to argue, like the instinct was still there, but something in his father's expression stopped him. You don't get to decide what someone else's survival should look like, Mr. Hayes said, and you certainly don't get to mock it. Daniel ran a hand through his hair again, more frantic this time. I didn't mock it. You called it embarrassing. That ended it. There was nothing left to reframe, nothing left to soften. Just truth. Daniel's shoulders dropped slightly, not in acceptance, in defeat. Lies. I didn't stay for the rest of it. I didn't need to. Whatever was going to happen next, it didn't belong to me anymore. Mitchell gave a small nod. The signal. People began moving again. Not inside the apartment this time. Toward the vehicles. Engines turning over one by one. A quiet chain reaction. I walked down the line. Not in the center. Not on display. Just through them. But as I passed, each one straightened slightly. Some gave a nod. Some a small salute. Nothing dramatic. Nothing exaggerated. Just acknowledgement. Respect. The kind that didn't need to be spoken. At the end of the line, I paused for a second. Looked back. Daniel was still standing there, in the doorway. Surrounded now, not by people who supported him, but by the absence of everything he had taken for granted. For a moment, our eyes met. There were 100 things he could have said. Sorry. Wait. Please. He didn't say any of them. And even if he had, it wouldn't have changed anything. I got into the passenger seat of Mitchell's car. The door closed with a solid final sound. Outside, hazard lights blinked on, one by one, a line of quiet signals. Then, the convoy moved, 15 vehicles pulling out in order. No horns, no spectacle, just presence. People on the street paused to watch. Some nodded, some simply stared, but I didn't look back again. By that night, I was sitting on my sister's couch, shoes off, hair pulled back, a cup of tea cooling in my hands. The house was quiet, safe. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I didn't need to look to know who it was. But I did anyway. Daniel, 12 missed calls. Daniel, 18 messages. I opened the thread. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. You're overreacting. This is insane. Please come back. We can fix this. The progression was almost textbook. Denial, minimization, panic, bargaining. I scrolled for a moment. Then I set the phone down. Didn't reply. Didn't block him yet. Just let it sit there. For once, I didn't feel the need to respond immediately. Didn't feel the urge to explain myself into being understood. Because the truth was, he understood enough. He just hadn't cared. And that was the part I couldn't unsee anymore. The days that followed were quieter than I expected. Not empty, just lighter. The group chat stayed active, checking in, making jokes, sharing updates like nothing about the way they had shown up was unusual. To them, it wasn't. That was the point. Mitchell called once. Settling in? She asked. Yes, ma'am. Good, she said. You did the right thing. I thought about that after we hung up. Not in a dramatic way, just turning it over quietly. The right thing. It hadn't felt heroic. It hadn't felt bold. It had felt necessary, like finally stepping out of a room where the air had been slowly disappearing. 2 weeks later, I signed the lease on a small one-bedroom apartment. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. The first night I slept there, it rained. Soft. Steady. The kind of sound that used to send my heart into overdrive. I woke up once, sat up in bed, listened, waited for the panic. It didn't come. Not fully. Not the way it used to. I took a breath. In for 4. Hold. Out for 6. My shoulders relaxed. Slowly. Carefully. Like something inside me was relearning what safety felt like. I changed my number after that. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. Some doors don't need to stay open. A week later, Sophia texted me. I have a friend, she wrote. Anna. She volunteers with veteran support programs. She understands this world. No pressure. Just thought I'd mention it. I smiled at the message. Didn't answer right away. Not because I wasn't interested, but because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't in a rush to fill space. I was okay sitting in it. Sometimes I think about that night. The storm. The words. The moment everything shifted. And I realized something I didn't understand then. Daniel didn't destroy my life. He revealed something I needed to see. And in doing that, he gave me the chance to choose differently. To choose people who didn't need me to be smaller to feel comfortable. To choose spaces where my healing wasn't treated like an inconvenience. To choose myself. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Pain doesn't make you weak. Surviving it doesn't make you embarrassing. And anyone who tries to convince you otherwise doesn't deserve a place in your life. Not even a small one. Not even temporarily. Because healing is hard enough without someone standing next to you telling you it shouldn't exist. I still have bad days. That hasn't changed. But I sleep better now. Breathe easier. And when it rains, sometimes I just listen. Not for danger. Not for memory. Just for the sound. And for the quiet that follows it.